Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mary Ellen Waith. This is Cristina Sanchez, and welcome to the first session this morning on the history of women in philosophy. We have our paper reading time is 20 minutes, as you know, with 10 minutes allotted for discussion and questions. If the speaker does go over the 20 minutes, we'll give you a little warning beforehand. If the speaker does go past the 20 minutes, that cuts into the discussion time, so we ask you to keep that in mind. And we apologize if there are any glitches on the way, but we are learning. So our first speaker today is Ingrid Alloni from the University of Milan in Italy, and her presentation is a paper on self-awareness to political and social improvement, a feminist identitarian path. You have your slides. Ingrid, are you ready?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you very much. The aim of this discussion is to show the articulation of the theme of identity in Western feminist thought in comparison with Black and decolonial thought. The theme of identity is one of the greatest topics of 20th century. The question developed in a particular way in the second half of 20th century in the West from different points of view, particularly with regard to gender, racial, and generational dimension. The first interesting dimension concerns the fact that both categories can be clearly distinguished into two currents, consisting of essentialism and constructivism. I changed the slide, okay. Essentialist theory postulates the existence of entities independent of human consent. For this reason, naturalness is the main characteristic of such position. The constructivist counterpart affirms the existence of an identity element, arguing that the distinctions are the results of various kinds of imposition, such as political, economic, and epistemic imposition. In this sense, race and gender must not be understood as eternal identity elements, but as a contingent system, which, however, influence the political structures. On the one hand, they present themselves as a relational, dynamic, and contextual dimension. On the other, they impose themselves, however, as an ordering element of a universal vertical taxonomy. In the first part of my intervention, I want to show the successful deconstruction of affirmative Cartesian subject and the resulting identity crisis. The strategies of constructing an identity process concern the use of the narration of one's own singular life history and participation in the social movements of claiming rights. Feminist philosophy show how it's possible to represent the self in a different and polyvalent way. For identity, a permanent indefinition becomes the most important element instead of the principle of non-contraction. The feminist subject, secondly, shows that identity is not based only on the recognition of one's own individual biography, but also on a project built collectively. If we recognize the ontological, gnosological, and practical scope of feminism, we have the possibility to break the symbolic order, patriarchal, hierarchical, normative, heterosexual, and phallocentric order through the claim of the existence of infinitive existential postures and subjectivation. I present these main features of identitarian path through a path of a 4 steps. This first one is represented by Adriana Cavarero. Adriana Cavarero, philosopher belonging to the current of the theory of sexual difference, proposes 3 main concepts, 3 key concepts to define the subject: the plurality, storytelling, and the inclination. Cavarero takes up figures lacking in the literary and mythological tradition, according to an archetypal function, to show the relational and dialectical attitude of identity. She contested the view that male-female differentiation have a natural matrix, arguing instead that such dichotomies are derived from sociocultural structures. The philosopher contrasted the group of women that are presented in the different works of antiquity, imaging the scenarios of daily and domestic life that no one has ever told. The second element is the narration of the self to the other. The mutual story of the story of life highlights the uniqueness of the other. And the third element, the philosopher emphasized, is the centrality of inclination in the constitution identity. Philosophy, I think, has forgotten the meaning of inclination, relationship, and projection towards the other, to the stranger. And Cavarero concludes the work focusing on the validity of the ontological condition of vulnerability that characterize the human. The second step I present is Judith Butler. Judith Butler proposes the feminist theoretical debate on the path of identity constitution. To the thought of Italian sexual difference and to French materialism represented by Monique Wittig, she proposes a version of the construction of the performative self, immersed in a fluid constant change. Each subject, in fact, is in a repetitive rhythm of doing and undoing the gender. Butler's goal is to challenge the idealized limits of the body, to replace the supposed immobility of them with the conception of an incessant waving practice. For this reason, the American philosopher uses the category of performativity. The gender is a performative way in the first place because it is the result of a practice, the result of a path of action. Secondly, it represents the concept of uniqueness. Everyone, in fact, is characterized by a story inscribed in the body, but also in the faculty of transformation and game of his own self. The two main concepts of Judith Butler's reflection are the body and the agency, of course. And gender is never made in a solitary dimension because it demands recognition. The identity criteria are therefore modified because, in addition to the principle of non-contraction replaced by otherness and metamorphosis, the place that affirms identity also changes. It becomes the situationality and also the existence and the openness to the future. What the feminist, post-colonial and trans-feminist movements have thought, however, also concerns the recognition of the meaning of which everybody is the bearer. For this reason, identity is also recognized not only in a present temporality, but also in a past temporality. The centrality attributed to the role of the body is instead an ontological and epistemic position because it is no longer possible to know the subject in the abstract. Choosing your own body means confronting with the rules imposed by the others and also by the past. The body is the bearer, of course, of cultural signs and is therefore historically constructed. And Butler, to conclude Butler, she also emphasizes the policy of the alliance of bodies, of course, for implementing coalition strategies that recognize the differences and the possibility of confrontation. As Angela Davis shows, in fact, of the body, the history of feminism is populated not only by the bodies of white and bourgeois women, but it's found perhaps in its most resistant and combative version also in the history of the bodies of black slave women. Davis proposes a non-traditional interpretation of the slave who, far from being a symbol of oppression and compliance, emerges as an example of moral and physical resistance. The stereotype not only touches the sphere of morality, but also the aesthetic one. The myth of the beautiful white, which is made to coincide with the right and the moral good, is extended also to the wolf phenotype. The myths in which the black woman is the protagonist, in fact, show the intersectional nature of oppression experienced by black women. They represent such women through a series of racist and sexist cultural stereotypes that have been assimilated as an ontological archetypes of the black body. The first myth that I consider is it refers to the animal construction of the body of the black woman. As reported by Angela Davis and Bell Hooks, the black woman narratives fit into a historical and relational framework built during the 18th and 19th century slavery experience in the south of the United States. The women work as slaves in the fields of the landowners next to the black men. And at the same time, they have sexual and reproductive function with the white master, domestic work, and care at the house of the white settler in the service of the wife. Black women are considered, like black men, to be work animals. Michelle Wallace highlights the process of viralization of the female body during the work time, but there are also two cultural stereotypes. The Black woman is at the same time superwoman and prostitute. The sexual aspect is a source of stereotypes for both the women and the Black men, whose bodies are both hypersexualized. The sexual dynamic between the Black women and the white men is relevant in two aspects. First, the body object of the Black slave is a guarantee compared to the production of labor power and a sexual enjoyment for the colony. Secondly, this dynamic also affects the relationship with the white women, which guarantees the colony the birth of children, allowing the hereditary succession of large estates. According to Collins, the Black prostitute should not only be considered as an object to satisfy sexual pleasure, but also as Isabel. The body of the Black woman is tempting, and the sexuality she proposes is deviant, and therefore the man has no chance to resist it. The specific trait of Isabel concerns the insatiability of her sexual appetites, and for this reason she is often presented as a monster. The Black man's sexuality and the role played by the Isabel are therefore a danger to the purity of the white race, and for this reason it is necessary to adopt a monstrous rhetoric toward their dishuman bodies. The last figure is the figure of the nanny, and is the other aspect in which the motherhood of Black women is declined alongside the figure of the matriarch. The role of the nanny is determined according to the relationship that the slave woman entertains with the wife of the colon. The difference between the two figures is that the matriarch deals with the growth and education of its children, while the nanny takes care of the children of the colon. Moreover, just as matriarchs represents a bad version of motherhood, the nannies under the control and orders of the colon and his wife realize the ideal of the good mother, obedient and devoid of sexual impulses. The figure of nanny demonstrates that hierarchical distinction between Black women and white women. These representations have their roots in a sexist and racial mythology. The attributes through which the representation of the slave are constructed only belong to a sexual, maternal, and working imaginary. I want to conclude with a different representation of the body represented by the experience of self-consciousness in Italy in the 70s. The practice of self-consciousness was born in the 60s in the USA. The term practice comes from the expression consciousness raising or raising awareness. The term self-consciousness is brought to Italy by Carla Lonzi, who gives life to the first collective experiences of small groups, so that everyone can talk about their own personal experience. The groups that are formed are many, and their product is the writing and the subsequent distribution of leaflets on which are reported the reflection of women on certain thematic. Mutual mirroring, the possibility of seeing oneself in other people, is the tool to use to implement a political change in reality. If therefore at first self-consciousness arises as a moment of reflection, of self-discovery and of verbalization with the other of one's own ego, at the moment when it emerges physically, it becomes a political gesture. It's a very different political act from political activity, typically understood because at first it investigates itself and speaks in its own name, not as a result of an imposition of a party of group reference. I want to conclude with a post-identitarian politics because I try to problematize and link the clear dichotomy between the abstraction of theoretical reflection on the constitution of subject with the dimension of lived emotional past, recognizing the existence of an I which is characterized by a biographical fabric, but which does not remain confined to individual experience and is shared in a collective dimension. My interest was moved by the intention of overcoming the identity paradigm itself. For this reason, I have progressively shifted the attention from the singular aspect to the plural one, taking into consideration both the co-constitutive dimension of the process of subjection with an ecological and interracial framework and the social dimension of identities. At the same time, an identity policy is only functional until it translates into a political ideological universalism. Identities, in IAPh's word, arises from useless or erroneous representation. The elements that concern gender, ethnicity, social class, and nationality today are often grouped into a single set, in a set that we call identity, but that has no meaning. It's not possible to provide a precise definition of the notion of identity. And for this reason, social aggregation and the foundation of community are conditions necessary for the survival of man and also to overpass the notion of identity. As a general rule, I use the relationship with the ecological context and the possibility of environmental survival. I think that the 21st century is therefore a chance to embark on a post-identity policy in which identity as a strategy of oppression of the self is replaced by the post-identity practice of self-inventing, imagining new postures based on the relationship and no longer on the classification distinction of the human. In this sense, overcoming identity means abandoning the politics of singularity and recognizing the existence of a subject starting from the relationship. The task presented to the intellectual is therefore twofold, as on the one hand, it must highlight the past paths that have undertaken the invention of naturalized identity. On the other hand, it must produce an imaginary that allows to overcome the need to define itself starting from the identity point of view, highlighting also the contextual, relational, and environmental components within which the process of subjectivity takes place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid.